Today, I'm going to show you how to download and install Google Android Studio. This is a Java editor that we're going to be using for our coursework. Here I have loaded up Google, and we're going to just type in Android Studio. Now for me, it's showing as a top option as an ad. You can click on that, or you can come down to the next one. Both should work. Notice they both go to developer.android.com. You want to make sure that you're downloading from the correct site. Next thing you'll notice that it comes up and says download Android Studio. This is showing that it's for Windows 64-bit. That is because it is determined that I am using a Windows 64-bit. That's why it's picked that one. If you were on a Mac OS, it would have one for Mac OS. You want to say that you've agreed to the terms and start the download. Now this is a kind of large download. It's about 900 megabytes, almost a gigabyte, so it will take a minute or two to finish downloading. While it's taking those couple minutes to download, you might want to look through the site and get an idea of other things that you can do, such as look at the visual layout editor, emulations, etc. If for some reason it did not pick the right download installer for you, or you're downloading for someone else because they don't have a fast internet connection, for example, you can scroll down to where it says download options. And here's the other options that you can find. For example, Windows 32-bit, Mac, Linux, etc. So download the appropriate file for you. Okay, now that our download is complete, we're going to click on our downloaded file so we can run the executable. When we run this executable, it will allow us to install the Android Studio. First, it's going to go and verify our install. Then it's going to come up with a little wizard. Basically, we're going to be next, next. Default, you probably want to put it in this location. So next, next, and then next to let it start the install process. Because of the size of the file, for Windows 64-bit, we were just under a gigabyte. This will take a minute or two to install. All right, when you get done, it's going to show a completed message. You'll click on Next, and you're basically done with your setup. You can choose to start Android Studio or not, depending upon what you have checked. I'm going to leave it checked for right now and click Finish. This is just going to launch Android Studio and give a couple of initial settings that you're going to need. If there's a previous version, do you want to import things? I did have a previous version on. I'm going to choose not to import my settings, however. If you had old files, you can choose to delete them by clicking on the checkbox, or you can leave it unchecked, depending upon what you want to do. And that's only if you have older versions installed. You probably won't see this. Now, one thing that is going to come up when you run, especially the first time, is data sharing. Do you want to share data with how you're using Android Studio with Google? Google is the developer for Android. I'm going to choose to not send. It doesn't change how it runs. It just changes what gets sent to or not to Google when you launch this application. So I'm just going to choose not to send it, let it run its stuff in the background real quick. And we're going to get our setup wizard. So once we have this wizard, we just want to kind of verify how we're going to be using Android Studio. I'm going to click Next. And you can choose either standard or to custom. If you choose standard, it's going to do all the standard things for you. I'm going to go through custom just so you can see what's going to be available. Do you want, for example, the light or the dark? Now, by default is what you would get if you use standard, which is the light. Some people prefer the dark background. I choose the lighter background personally. Check the components you want to install or not install. For example, performance Intel is checked by default. I'm also going to choose, do I want to have my SDK platform? Right now, I'm going to choose to leave this all as default. Now, one thing you see here is that I can run this in what's called an accelerated performance mode. You may or may not have that available to you. What it's going to try to do is load the emulator all in RAM so it runs just a little bit faster for your testing purposes if you have enough RAM. I'm going to leave it at the default 2 gigabytes. The reason for doing that is I don't want to consume too much of my RAM in my emulator when I'm going to have other applications potentially running at the same time. This just lets you go in and kind of verify everything that you need. We're going to check finish. It's going to download a few things. Depending upon what tools you had, if you chose custom, you might be downloading even some more things, take a little bit longer. I chose the basic standard, so you will download a little bit, but not too much. All right, and we come back and we are finished. So that's nice. Did not take nearly as long to download these extra couple files compared to downloading all of Android Studio like we did before. Now, Android Studio, I always run it that first time when I do the install because you do have those additional steps that are not completed when you do the install. Now that you've done the Android install and run it that first time, the install wizard is complete. Anytime you launch Android Studio, you should get a screen that looks something similar to this. Now, you'll notice that Android Studio is on 3.4.2. As of this recording, 3.5 was in a final beta, so you should see that pretty soon. The changes between the two should be relatively minor. Every time they come out with a new version, Google does make some changes, of course, but it should work. And when we get 3.5, we'll change this as well. At this point, we could start a new studio project. We could open up an existing project, or we're going to do what we could do is we're just going to exit since we are finished with our install process.